welcome to our panel on women in peace operations. Joining us today as our experts are Brigadier Sylvia SPERANDIO, who was the first woman ever to be promoted to an officer level position in the Austrian military, and OSCE Senior Coordination Advisor for Gender Issues, Vera STROBACHOVA-BUDWAY. Thank you both very much for joining us. And I'm Ethan, I'll be the moderator for this panel. If I could just get an opening statement from each of you, starting with Brigadier SPERANDIO.
Thank you very much for the invitation and being part of your conference. Thank you very much for the well-organization of your conference. And thank you very much for this important topic of equality in progress. Speaking as a soldier that joined the armed forces more than 20 years ago, I can tell you that quite a lot has changed in the field of women in the military, but I also want to underline that we are really still in progress. So let's go back a little. As you may know, Pallas Athene is not only the goddess of wisdom. She wears a helmet and spear, and she is also associated with strategy and warfare. And, which is a big sign to me, she stands in front of the Parliament of Austria. So through the centuries, there were a couple of female military leaders and commanders, not really that much. But there was quite a list of females who dressed up as soldiers to serve secretly in the armed forces all over the world. However, females always played a big role in the wars, at least as indirect influencers, as they were followers of the warriors, or also later, for example, in the World War I and II, they worked in the armament factories or took over the duties as radio operators or in the medical service or also in the air defense, where they really shot the enemy pilots. Step by step, the women also were allowed to serve as real soldiers. In Austria, for example, since 1998, with the possibility to serve in all positions, which means also in combat units. This is not very common internationally, even not in nations where military service is compulsory for women as well as for male. Unfortunately, the number of female soldiers and in the Austrian armed forces and also in other forces does not reach the politically expected rates yet. In Austria, we are around 3 to 4% in the whole force, which means a group of still invisible and lonely fighters. Nevertheless, we are comparatively highly represented in our, not only, but peacekeeping missions and other missions, which brings me deeper into the topic of this session. Nowadays, risks and threats change the military concepts and strategies from the patriotic warfare to peace enforcement, peacekeeping, which means not fighting against the enemy, but operating for people, for affected population in these mission areas. The military serves under different mandates, the United Nations, NATO, and the EU, for the protection of the people, for the protection of women and children. And that means and demands definitely a people-oriented strategy, as well as definitely to integrate the gender perspective in all these strategies. So let me divide the gender perspective within the military in two fields. On the one hand, the gender perspective in the forces, and on the other hand, the gender perspective outside the forces. That means concerning all the civilian military cooperations. So why is it so important to have gender perspectives within the forces? The presence of women alone changes communication style in a very positive way within the soldiers, as well as it also arouses the ambition to learn better, to train better, and so on. But that's true for women as well as for male. We also know that it arises the group intelligence when women are in the teams. So observing complex situations like peacekeeping missions through female eyes can complete the big picture with another mosaic stone and influence the operational decision making. So there is also a big diversity within the forces, as they are multinational and need a deep understanding of each other with all these different social, cultural, and political backgrounds of the troops all over the world. So women usually have a very important role because they can build the bridges within the soldiers of the different nations better, in my opinion, and optimize working together on the same goals, which means working on the gender perspective role going outside the military force. And the presence of female soldiers allows a much better, broader, and deeper access to the population, especially to the women and children, and where an excess of male soldiers cannot have constraints because of cultural, ethnical, and religious reasons. So gaining the confidence of the people is crucial for gathering the necessary information to analyze the security threats. Very often, the security threats are, and also the urgent needs for women and children are missed, because the military is negotiating with chiefs or mayors who are usually male. So for a successful operation, it is unavoidable to get the big picture of the whole community. Therefore, it is necessary that female soldiers are involved also in the decision-making processes of all the levels. The commanders, if they are not female, and mostly they are not female, they need these advices, because even little misunderstandings can lead to very, very big problems. It can be very tricky, and it is like a rope dance and needs a very sensitive approach, especially concerning all the problems with the sexual discrimination, sexual harassment, and sexual abuse, which is seen completely different in all these different cultures. So this is the experience that I made on my own throughout my time serving as a soldier and being a military medical surgeon, and contributing also to a couple of missions. So my last remark is this: if there are also resolutions, directives, orders, and so on, there's a lot of work ahead to change all our minds and fully integrate gender perspective, not only in our daily business, but in our everyday life. So thank you very much for your attention.
And thank you very much for your comments. It was very enlightening to hear a little bit about the practical benefits that having greater gender diversity in militaries can bring. Now, Ms. Budway, if you would like to give your opening remarks, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me to participate in this very important discussion. I will say a few brief words about the OSCE and its work in promoting gender equality in the security sector, focusing primarily on women's participation in conflict prevention, crisis management, and post-conflict reconstruction. So just an introductory, a few brief words about the OSCE. The OSCE is the world's largest regional security organization with 57 participating states in North America, Europe, and Eurasia. It takes a comprehensive approach to security, covering human security, economic and environmental security, and political military security. So the three dimensions of comprehensive security. It's a consensus-based organization. That means all decisions are made on consensus of all 57 participating states. And gender equality is a key component of comprehensive security. So without gender equality, we cannot have peaceful, prosperous, and stable societies. And therefore, gender is mainstreamed in all our programs, policies, projects, and activities. The OSCE has adopted several ministerial council decisions which focus on women's participation in conflict prevention, crisis management, and post-conflict reconstruction. Several ministerial council decisions have focused on women in the security and defense sector, in the armed forces, police, and border management. Although including women in peace processes continues to be an imperative for the organization, there's still very few women in support teams of mediators or in leading positions as negotiators in peace processes. There are also few formal connections being made between the work of mediators in the official processes and the work of women on the ground through civil society and community action. Many women are engaged in vital local mediation and dialogue efforts, and we need to make a greater effort to link those unofficial mediation efforts to official negotiations and official peace processes. The OSCE is working with women peace builders and mediators in Southeast Europe, the South Caucasus, Eastern Europe, and Central Asia, with the aim of ensuring their equal and meaningful participation in these peace processes. It's doing this by capacity building, so developing their negotiation and mediation skills, by developing and supporting networks of women peace builders, and by providing these women peace builders access to more formal structures. We also work with local women peace building organizations on the ground. For instance, one example in Ukraine, we brought together women civil society organizations from both sides of the contact line to discuss concrete issues like, for instance, access to social services or the rise of domestic violence during COVID lockdown. Another dimension of our work is helping our participating states implement their commitments to the UN Security Council 1325, Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace, and security, namely helping them develop their national action plans on 1325. So currently 70% or 40 out of 57 OSCE participating states have national action plans. And the OSCE, for instance, organized a National Action Plan Academy for government officials and civil society organizations on developing, implementing, and localizing national action plans. These national action plans play an important role in accelerating progress to involve women throughout the conflict cycle. Yes, so some other OSCE initiatives to support women in the security sector include mentoring and training programs for women in the police, supporting networks of women in policing in Southeast Europe and Central Asia, supporting women in border management, trainings and gender mainstreaming in border management services. Another activity, the OSCE published a training manual on gender in military operations, which is a guidance for military personnel working at the tactical level in peace support operations. This publication is a part of the OSCE's collection of toolkits and guidance on integrating a gender perspective into efforts to build peace and security. It illustrates how a gender-sensitive approach to operational practices can benefit conflict prevention, crisis management, and post-conflict rehabilitation, and provides concrete suggestions on enhancing women's participation in peace operations, such as conducting gender analysis, collecting sex disaggregated data, addressing conflict-related sexual violence, looking at gender parity and team composition, and of course, engaging with NGOs. Last but not least, just a few words about what the OSCE is doing internally to try to attract more women working in political military affairs within our own structures, especially in our field operations. We're currently only around 24% of international seconded posts in our field operations are female. So we're taking this seriously and implementing a lot of measures. For instance, we have a gender parity strategy at the OSCE where we want to reach parity at all levels on all positions by 2026, focusing also on targeted recruitment and outreach programs targeting women in the security sector. And also very important things like ensuring that within our own structures and field operations and organization that we have a gender sensitive management culture and work environment. So working concretely to address bias and gender stereotypes, working to combat and prevent sexual harassment, and of course working to prevent sexual harassment, sexual exploitation and abuse. Of course, one of the greatest challenges to attracting more women in some of our field operations remain that some of our operations on the ground are not family duty stations. This still remains one of the challenges to attracting more women. And there are many more challenges, of course, to women's participation in peace building and peacekeeping and security work, all of which I can address then more specifically during the Q&A session. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Ms. Budway, for the enlightening presentation on the OSCE's important role in improving gender diversity. Now, both of you brought up how little represented women are in active field operations. And I believe the statistic is only about 6% of all uniformed police, justice, and correctional personnel in field missions are women. You both also spoke at length about the tangible benefits that including more women in these operations can bring. Now, why is it that you think that it's been so difficult to bring up the number of women active in field operations? Is it a matter of institutional biases, or has it been difficult to attract women to these positions? And if we could just start with Ms. Budway for the response, please.
Okay, thank you. I think some of the challenges and the obstacles to attracting more women in peacekeeping or military operations still remains that these traditional discriminatory gender roles and institutional culture that's pervasive in these environments. Of course, there are a lot of structural barriers like social exclusion, harassment that's experienced, which is often rooted in these persistent gender norms and stereotypes, are all mechanisms which exclude women. I know that women often decide to leave the security forces due to this prevailing culture, which disproportionately excludes women from power and leadership positions. And these kind of narrow forms of masculinities, which is still the paradigm in security institutions. So I see these as key obstacles, but also I think I mentioned too, there is a challenge of the working environment or working environments that are not conducive for women to stay and thrive in these environments. Namely, many of them are not what we call family friendly. So it's a challenge for women with families, and still the pervasive organizational culture in a lot of these structures is not just very hierarchical, but rife with a lot of kind of negative gender stereotypes that need to be overcome. So I would see those as some of the key obstacles and barriers to women both entering in security professions and then staying in them.
And there's not really much to add because everything was already mentioned, but I say this always says that the military is an organization which is made from men from males, for males, and is still in a, especially in Austria, we have a really tradition which is definitely male dominated and leaves not much space for like female leadership. But I think we are in progress, and then as far as females come in senior leadership positions, I think it can be of a kind of a better mentorship to encourage the young women to go the same through the same career. One thing which is really a constraint or is really difficult, but not only for the female soldiers, is that the job as a soldier is really not family friendly. It depends on in which force you're working, but in Austria, it's definitely not. Because when you're younger, you need really a lot of training, which you cannot make working 9 to 5. Yeah? I think these are the things who are really the reasons why women do not join the army. And it is still not, you know, the family at home say, what do you want to become a soldier? This is nothing for girls and so on. So I think it's still also the perspective of the society that being a soldier primarily has not a very high image, and then being a female is even less. Yeah.
Okay, thank you both for your answers. They were very illuminating. Now, Brigadier SPERANDIO, you mentioned sexual assault as an issue in peacekeeping operations, and I believe between 2005 and 2017, there have been over 2,000 accusations of sexual abuse levied against UN peacekeepers specifically. This obviously undermines the UN's credibility in the communities they're attempting to serve. And I just wanted to hear both of your thoughts, but I'd like to start with Brigadier SPERANDIO. Is this an issue that A, can be fixed by increasing the number of women represented? And B, does this issue reveal something more about peacekeeping institutions and structures? Is this misogyny trickling down, or what is the cause or the source of these abuses?
Yeah, this is a really a shame on all these soldiers. The reasons I think are complex. To being far away from home for months or years, whatever, weeks, months, does not make it easier for the males to handle their sexual life. Otherwise, if there is not possible to give them institutional possibilities to live their life, yeah, they always find different ways to do this. I'm honest, yeah. Even if they are trained not to do so on. So there, it is really difficult, and I don't give you a real answer why still this is is done. I'm not sure if we increase the number of female soldiers, if this reason really improves. Because the taboo of the female soldiers to the male soldiers within the within your contingents is much higher than the taboo, let's say, from other women outside of this community. And definitely, that's what I say. You can order these things, and they are ordered. And only thing is to get them out of bounds. What is done. But always there is a way to find, unfortunately, this horrible sceneries. Yeah. Nothing to add, unfortunately. Yeah. I don't know, maybe
Yeah, so that's, you know, it's kind of tough for me because I've never personally actually been in a, you know, worked in a military environment. So I only go by what I read and hearsay. And if I compare it more with other environments, I mean, we have this discussion, does having more women in, for instance, senior leadership positions in the corporate world or in any kind of structure, does that, you know, will that ensure gender equality? And whereas I can say, yes, I can imagine having more women in these positions to a certain extent does help in that they can provide role models, but having more women itself isn't the solution. Because here, and especially I can guess that in a military setting, role models are very important, and the tone from the top is very important. So I think, you know, what's needed is to work with the leaders, albeit male or female, or, you know, if we have predominantly male leaders, to work with them in ensuring that there is a gender sensitive environment that has a zero tolerance for things like sexual harassment or sexual exploitation and abuse. That has to be from the tone from the top. There has to be a zero tolerance policy with no room for discussion on this. And yeah, so there has to be, you know, consequence management in these organizations to ensure that these types of behaviors are not tolerated and B, not replicated. And I think that's really important, is really the tone from the top, the examples, and also when it comes to something like sexual harassment, zero tolerance, and zero tolerance means zero tolerance.
Sorry, did you have something?
I chat with you with the zero tolerance, but the problem is it's only a few of the soldiers who make these problems. This I wanted to add. This is not because I don't want to have them globally punished or accused for this. This is not the truth. That's I just wanted to add. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you both very much for your perspectives, both the top down and the bottom up. I think those are both important avenues in addressing this issue. Now I'd like to open up the floor to questions for anyone that has any to ask our experts here today.
Hello, thank you very much. I would like to ask a question posed at Brigadier SPERANDIO. Thank you very much for both of your very interesting insights into this topic. But I would be curious, as someone who is not particularly familiar with the military as an institution, if you could expand on your practical experience on the missions that you've worked with, where your female perspective has helped to resolve situations, what sort of situations you have contributed to, and how it made things better for the people involved, especially maybe the victims that you're trying to help in your missions. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much for your question. I give you an example. It was not a peacekeeping mission, but it was a humanitarian mission in Namibia during a flooding, where you have all these urgent humanitarian needs, and all these tribal chiefs, they told what they need for transportation, that so on. And we started to start these relief operations, and then we went to the women and talked to the women what they need. Yeah, they need, for example, milk bottles, diapers, delivery kits, and so on. And if you would not mention this, you know, in one of these villages, there were 11 pregnant women shortly before delivery. And if they would not have all these amenities, would they need just for delivery and really having a baby and let's say and bring all these necessary things to them, it would be even much more disaster as they already were in. Yeah, this is just a simple example from the practical, really from the basics.
Thank you very much for your
answers
answer.
this your question, or?
Yes, it does answer my question. Thank you very much. It paints a bit of a clearer picture on what the female contribution can be in humanitarian aid and in peacekeeping. Thank you.
Now I'd like to ask you both, but starting with Ms. Budway, only a few countries have created ambassador or envoy positions for global women's issues. And Canada's is the first ambassador level role to focus on women, peace, and security. Do you think that this position is changing the way women, peace, and security is integrated into foreign policy today?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think it's a start. I think it's a good sign to see more of these ambassadors. You mentioned Canada, of course. There's several other countries with these ambassadors: Sweden, France, Netherlands, Spain, Iceland, Norway, Finland, UK, even the US, all have ambassadors either for gender equality or women, peace, and security. And for instance, in the OSCE, we're part of an informal network of these ambassadors and envoys. And depending on where they're positioned in their respective structures and how much influence they have, you know, this is how much influence they can wield on foreign policy itself. What I find interesting is we see more countries now that are adopting a feminist foreign policy. Canada has one, Sweden has one, and Spain is also now considering officially adopting a feminist foreign policy. And I'll just give you an example of which I've observed with Sweden from the Swedish feminist foreign policy. Sweden right now has the rotating chairpersonship of the OSCE. And the chairperson in office, the Swedish foreign minister, Anna Lindh, when she travels and meets with her counterparts, she always mentions gender equality is one of the top issues on the agenda. And this is how I think gender equality can really be mainstreamed, if you say, in foreign policy, if it's not relegated to some, you know, last kind of talking point, but really if it is brought up at the highest level. And what we've seen so far, at least in the Swedish example, is that that because this is such a high priority on the agenda, it is being raised, it is being discussed at all levels, and you know, in all at all occasions. So this is what can really affect change if it comes from the top like this. So I think with the ambassadors and envoys, it's a good start. The next stage would be, of course, to have it integrated into a foreign policy to really ensure that it can affect real change.
We have about 10 minutes remaining in the panel, so I'd like to take this opportunity to ask a little bit about the greatest struggles you've had in your careers, making it in primarily male-dominated professions, and what advice you would give to your younger self, if you could. And if we could start with Brigadier SPERANDIO, that would be ideal.
What was the biggest struggle? There were that many that I can't tell you what was the biggest one. But of course, it is still in a male-dominated organization, it is still a comprehensive meaning or mindset that a female cannot have the same efforts or cannot bring this, cannot make the job as well as a man. Yeah, especially in the military forces, is because if they always think that you are physically not that strong that they are, which makes definitely no, there is no difference, because for, let's say, a lot of positions, you do not need physical strength. And they think that we are not that we are not resistant enough, whatever. So, and the third thing, which is really let's say a strange thing, is always that has something to do also a kind of sexual harassment, because you are always, especially during the missions, the few female soldiers within their troops are always, to be said, the girlfriends of a lot of the other soldiers. Yeah, this is really a big struggle, because this is really unfair, because they think you're just there for being the lover of a lot of others, even if you're not. It's just to make them, to make a bad picture of them, and to discriminate them. And this is really a big struggle. This was also a struggle with me. Yeah.
So I think in my case, if I think back to when I started my career, before I started working on the topic of gender equality, and I was working in Southeast Europe in development, and it was, again, a predominantly male environment. Of course, I was much younger, and as a young woman, I think the hardest thing was to be taken seriously, you know. And I remember working in, as a very young woman in a predominantly team of older men, to really just fight to be taken seriously, to have my voice heard, and not to be perceived as this young woman. I mean, I remember even trying to like run around wearing, you know, gray suits, you know, and really not trying to look feminine, which is authentic, because then fearing that I wouldn't be taken as seriously. And the usual conundrum that many women face is you have to work twice as hard, you know, just to be considered on par. And all of that I went through years and years ago. And I think when I give advice to young women today, of course, easier said than done, but, you know, I always say, be authentic, be yourself. You know, we don't have to act like men and be as women to adopt male characteristics, and we should be authentic. And when we talk about leadership as well, if the paradigm is still the male model of leadership, many women try, and in a lot of training courses, and I remember way back when we always used to have these, you know, how to be more of a leader, where we would have to try to work on ourselves as women to be more like men. And I think now, fortunately, we're in a time and age where there is more of this authenticity, and there is something of female leadership qualities that are valued and sought after. So that is my greatest kind of call, is be authentic, be yourself, and stay true to that, because those are the qualities that I think are, especially now in this day and age, are really needed.
Thank you both so much for sharing your personal experiences. They were both sobering and inspiring. Now we're running very low on time now. We only have about 5 minutes remaining. So if I could just get a brief final statement from both of you, it's kind of encapsulating what you think is the most important aspect that is not spoken about sufficiently. So yeah, and if we can start with Brigadier SPERANDIO, please.
As I already said, I think each of us has to change the mindset, because if you're honestly to yourself, it's not always that simple to have really the complex overview in all the gender perspectives, because we have, all of us had experiences in different ways, experience also with the other sex, and this makes us reacting also subconsciously in ways we do not want to do. And I think this is a big challenge to ourselves. And if we start with these reflection to ourselves and developing a really inside attitude, and not only the political awareness of gender perspective, but really the daily life of it, I think then going out of each of us, we can change that. Yeah? Of course, in this complex international environment, peacekeeping missions are, and also a very international, and also for the soldiers is a difficult environment, being far away from home, being outside a cozy home, etc. To keep up all these humanitarian ideas. This is hard work on the troops, and hard work on yourself. That's my opinion.
So maybe just for my closing thought, again, going back to why are we discussing this? Why is gender equality important? And if we talk about gender equality in the military and the security forces, it's not just because it's the right thing to do, and keeping in mind that having gender equality will result in a better outcome, better decision making, and better results on the ground. And I think we heard a wonderful example of the peacekeeping mission, like serving the needs of the communities that we work in. So we need a gender balance to be able to do that. And it's not about having more women is gonna we need women, and women are better decision makers, but we need that balance in decision making, and we need all perspectives represented. So yeah, it's the right thing to do, and it's also the smart thing to do. So I'll end on that.
Thank you guys both so much for joining us. Your experience and insight has been invaluable. I'd just like to remind both of you, as well as everyone else listening, that the final panel will be directly after this on the same Zoom channel. So thank you both again so much, and
Thank you.
have a nice day.